Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. It's kind of crazy, right? Because the Penn State UCLA game took up so much oxygen from the college football world on Saturday that at the same time that Penn State was completely melting down against the UCLA Bruins, it's also worth noting Texas was kind of melting down as well. Billy Napier pulling the classic Billy Napier. I'll give Billy Napier credit. Nobody is better at coaching really hard after his entire fan base has given up on him and hated his guts quite like Billy Napier. But Florida gets the 29-21 win, start to finish, wire to wire. It was largely dominant, even though the final score might not reflect it. Let's go ahead and dive in. But to me, the story really is Texas, because Texas, let's just call it what it is. Just like Penn State was preseason number 2, Texas was preseason number 1. And I think what's interesting about this game is two things can be true. One, I hate to say it, they got themselves an Arch Manning problem. I don't know what they do about Arch Manning, but here's the other thing. I actually don't know what Texas is very good at right now, and I don't think it's getting fixed this season. And what's interesting to me about Texas is this, okay? So you go back to the preseason conversation. I remember talking about this at the time. In the preseason, the big debate was Arch Manning, and you were on one of two sides. He's either generational, going to be great, or you were kind of on that Steve Spurrier. If he was so great, why did he never play over Quinn Ewers last year? I was in that camp. But the one thing I will also say is this, is I talked myself into, and I think justifiably, even if Arch isn't that good, there's so much talent around him, it doesn't matter. I remember going back to my prep work back in June and July, and you look at that roster, Anthony Hill on defense, Colin Simmons on defense, Ryan Wingo at receiver, DeAndre Moore, Quintravian Wisener, who I know has been hurt. So much talent. I was like, I don't even know if it matters if Arch is any good because there is so much talent around them. Well, what Saturday proved was that even if Arch stinks, everybody else kind of stinks as well. Okay, first of all, the defense. What was that? Again, Florida, the last time that we saw Florida, 141 yards of total offense for Florida. What was it? 61 yards passing for DJ Lagway. 0 for 13 on third down. Saturday, I know they're back in the swamp. I get it. But they took the ball and shoved it right down Texas's throat. And, Texas never really recovered from that. And the stats reflect that it was just a poor performance all around, not just at the quarterback position. In the game, Texas allowed Florida almost 500 yards of total offense. DJ Lagway, nearly 300 yards passing, 21 of 28 passing, over 10 yards per completion. This was a guy that averaged 2 yards per completion the last time we saw him. The run game, 159 yards, 4 yards per carry. The O-line, so the defense was terrible. The O-line was equally as terrible. Listen, Arch was not good, and we're going to talk about it in a minute. But first of all, 10 penalties, I think at least 3 or 4 false starts, including a couple back-to-back at a crucial time late in the game. In the game, they also gave up 6 sacks and 7 TFLs. If you want to say that some of the sacks were on Arch for holding the ball too long, that's fine. But a lot of them were on the O-line as well. And so this is not a good team, and I don't think it's getting fixed. I do think there is a bigger problem, though, and I think it's that Steve Sarkisian very clearly has an Arch Manning problem. Now, again, I want to make sure I'm not putting this all on Arch, because I said this even after the Ohio State game. Yes, Arch was disappointing against Ohio State, but at some point, Steve Sarkisian has had 2 quarterbacks that were deemed to be generational coming out of high school. Quinn Ewers was statistically one of the greatest quarterbacks in high school football history, according to the 24/7 recruiting database, okay? Or one of the best prospects is probably the right way to put it. He's had 2 5-star can't-miss guys that both now appear set to have missed. So some of it is on Steve Sarkisian, but some of it is on Arch Manning. He's just not good enough right now, okay? In this game, 16 of 29 passing, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. As I said, sacked 6 times. Some of them were on the O-line, but quite a few of them were absolutely not on the O-line and absolutely on Arch for holding the ball too long. And so to me, I think it sets up a very interesting situation. And I think, first of all, it sets up a conversation. Arch Manning just isn't good, okay? So all of these quarterbacks, there's so many quarterbacks that have been kind of hit or miss or whatever. But what was always interesting to me about Arch, all these other guys, at least at some point, showed that at some point they were capable of doing it. Like with DJ Lagway. I've been very critical of DJ Lagway because he hasn't been good. But the counter to that is at least I had the knowledge that like at some point DJ Lagway did do it. Cade Klubnik has stunk most of this year. But part of the reason he was my Heisman pick and part of the reason that I didn't give up on him necessarily is because he did it. He was awesome last year after he got by about week 2, week 3. And so that was the difference between Cade Klubnik, DJ Lagway. Even Nico had shown plenty of flashes. Arch had never done it. Well, now we forget the 2-game sample size last year where he was not good against UL Monroe, was pretty good against Mississippi State. 3 games this year. And I think you can only describe, or 5 games this year, and I think you have to describe 3 of them as complete duds, including the only 2 Power 5 teams that he's played, Ohio State and Florida. Now, again, I understand those are 2 of the better defenses in college football, but when you're the quarterback at Texas, you're supposed to be, those are the games that matter. Those are the games that you're judged by. And, it's almost like James Franklin. It's like, okay, it's cool that you beat Purdue by 30. What are you doing against Ohio State? What are you doing against Michigan? And it's the same with Arch. Like, I'm not saying you have to win all these games, but now 0-2 against power conference teams. His wins as a starting quarterback at Texas are against San Jose State, UTEP, Sam Houston, Mississippi State, and UL Monroe last year. And he wasn't even good against UTEP, 11 of 25 passing, 8 straight incompletions. He wasn't even good against UL Monroe last year, and so I'm starting to worry. And what I'm starting to also think is this. Matt, you can pop up my tweet about the situation, is I think Steve Sarkisian has a very interesting situation on his hands. And this is what I tweeted after the game, and I was actually surprised by some of the reaction to it. I said, it's going to be an interesting few months for Steve Sarkisian. Arch Manning is a redshirt sophomore. In theory, he has 2 years of eligibility after this. You can't run off of Manning, which basically means you can't force him to transfer. But Arch has shown zero ability to be good enough to win SEC games. What do you do? And I put that out there, and I actually was surprised by the number of people that's like, of course you can run off of Manning. It doesn't matter. By the way, great stat from producer Matt. Arch Manning's wins this year, San Jose State, Sam Houston State, and UTEP combined 3-12, 3-9 in games where they're not playing Texas. Okay. So that's the competition that he has beaten. But back to Arch is I don't know what you do if you're Steve Sarkisian, because first of all, I think this is kind of a low-key underrated part of the situation that Texas finds themselves in. They haven't been able to recruit a quarterback for the last 2 seasons because nobody wants to sit behind Arch Manning because they know there's no chance they're going to play. And I think that's part of the problem. You can recruit other 5-star guys, but you know that when it's Arch Manning's time, he's going to get a shot because his last name is Manning. And so they haven't really recruited a quarterback behind him. The backup who came in yesterday was a 5th-year senior. Remember, Arch Manning got his helmet knocked off late in the game, had to come out for a play. The backup is a guy by the name of Matthew Caldwell who transferred in from, he transferred in last year from Troy. This is his 4th school in 5 years. He's gone. Now, Texas does have a 5-star committed in 2026, but he's not going to be ready to play next year. I think you're kind of stuck with Arch Manning. The only thing I can say, the only way you get a competent quarterback in is if you go into the portal and say, hey, it's an open competition. And again, are you going to do that to Arch Manning? And people say, well, why can't you just run off Arch, force him to transfer? All I'm saying is you can, but there are certain, like, for lack of a better term, political balances that you have to toe. Peyton Manning is a very important person in the world of sports. Eli Manning is a very important person. They both have a huge platform on ESPN every week. Archie Manning is a very important person. They are the first family of football, okay? And so I'm just saying, is like, you can do whatever you want, but the Manning family does not seem like a family that you want to piss off. But I also don't know the counter to that of how much longer you can keep playing them, because then you just piss off all the Texas fans. And so it's an interesting scenario. I don't know what Texas does. I think they're stuck with them this year. And I think more importantly, they're probably stuck with them next year, because even if the 5-star they have committed, Dia Bell, is really good, He ain't going to be ready to start week 1 of next year. And if he is, good for him and probably really bad for Arch Manning. But I think you're stuck with him this year and next year. And really quickly, I'll just say this because I want to get to some other stuff. We're already almost an hour into the show. You look at the situation with Arch. I don't know how many. They're not a playoff team this year. I know we can say it and whatever, and who knows? It's early. They have to play at Georgia. They play Oklahoma next week. I think if you couldn't figure out Florida's defense, you ain't going to figure out Oklahoma's. Texas A&M is going to have a better quarterback when they play. Vanderbilt is going to have a better quarterback when they play. Arkansas is going to have a better quarterback when they play. I'm not saying that Texas loses all of those games, but I think those were all games that we just chalked up as wins that I don't think are wins anymore. So it's a fascinating scenario with Arch Manning, and I just don't know what else there is to say. And I think Steve Sarkisian's kind of stuck in a corner. I think that's kind of the risk reward of recruiting a Manning is at some point you got to play him. And if he's not good, I don't know what to do with. I'll be really quick on this, but for old school listeners of the show, I remember when Bronny James committed to USC, and I'll be transparent is I know I'll just say this, and this isn't a knock on Bronny. It's the truth. And I know somebody in the comments will be like, you're just talking trash about Bronny for no reason. Bronny had nowhere else to go. And by the way, he only went to USC. If you remember, I'm going to get very specific for the people that are going to say I'm making stuff up. Reese Dixon Waters, who I believe just goes by Reese Dixon, was a returnee who decided to transfer out of the program. He's now at San Diego State, or he was at San Diego State. Trey White. So it wasn't until USC had a bunch of transfers that they actually took Bronny. Conversely, people were like, oh, Oregon, oh, Ohio State. I know people on those coaching staffs that were just like, we weren't recruiting Bronny because when you bring Bronny James in, you have to play him. And if he's not good enough, you're kind of, for lack of a better term, screwed. And so now I think Texas has backed themselves into a corner. I think it's going to be hard to bench Arch Manning. You really have no one else to put in. And it's interesting. And it ain't getting better this year, and it probably isn't getting better next year either.